Parts of speech. Any discussion or analysis of the English language usually starts with parts of speech, which basically is a way of describing the function of a word in a sentence. You start by coming to understand the basic definitions of the parts of speech, but once you start applying it, you have to actually go back to this definition, which is the function of a word in a sentence. Sometimes words that seem to be one part of speech are another because of what they are doing in the sentence. Before discussing these parts of speech, it's important to remember that when we talk about words, we're talking first about letters. A letter basically represents a sound. And then we put letters together to create a word. And that word then represents a thought. Those thoughts can have functions in a sentence, and when we put the appropriate words together, we wind up with a sentence which represents an idea. And then you'll put sentences together to create paragraphs, and then essays, and research papers, etc. So it's important to remember this basic concept that letter leads to word, which leads to sentence, and what their definitions are. Most of the time a letter is just a sound, with a few exceptions, as in the word I, the pronoun I. So there are 8 parts of speech in the English language, and I have created an acronym to help you remember them, and it is CAP, NAP, IV. Now you'll notice that the different letters have different colors, and throughout these lessons and tutorials, whenever it is important to notice the function of a word in a sentence or a word's part of speech, it will be aligned with these colors. C for green, A adverb will be pink, etc., etc., and you'll see them as we list out the definitions. So the C represents conjunction, and a conjunction is a word that connects words to words, phrases to phrases, or clauses to clauses. And we'll talk about the definition of phrases and clauses in another lesson, but conjunctions basically function to connect. The basic function is to connect. The A stands for adverb, and an adverb describes a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Adjectives and adverbs are very similar, but they have different functions. Together they describe all the words that can be modified or described. The P stands for preposition, and prepositions show relationship between a noun and other words in the sentence. This part of speech will always function in a phrase. So you will have a prepositional phrase. If it's not functioning in a phrase, it's really an adverb, and we'll talk about that more in the lesson about prepositions. The N stands for noun, and nouns represent a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. And it's important to remember that fourth one, the idea, because there are quite a few nouns that are actually ideas. The second A stands for adjective. And you'll notice here that the colors that are connected in these sections are coordinated. The noun, the adjective, and the pronoun are all these different variations of blue. So adjectives, or an adjective, is a word that describes a noun or a pronoun. The P stands for pronoun, and a pronoun replaces a noun. The I stands for interjection, and interjections are words that show strong emotion. They can function as sentences in themselves, or they can be woven into a sentence. We'll talk about the punctuation required to do that later. And the final letter in the acronym CAPNAP-IV, the V, stands for verb. And a verb expresses action or state of being. When we talk in detail about verbs, you'll see all the different types of verbs there are and why it's important to remember that they express state of being. as well as action. And now we'll go on to the lessons on each of these parts of speech in the order of the acronym CAPNAP-IV in order to help you remember them.